Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4383-400-633 4x4 single-acting spring hinge, full mortise, residential weight, lube bearing, steel base, satin brass plated. That's a mouthful, so let's go over this part number. Let's dissect it. LB stands for lube bearing, LB, which is a maintenance-free sort of concealed bearing design proprietary to Bommer. The 4383, this is a bit less common hinge for us to sell. That means that the hinge is made for Taylor branded doors and frames, and that is a specific reference to the location of the screw holes and the 5/8 radius. Those two things conspire to make it a Taylor branded sort of hinge template pattern. Well, we'll go over those locations a bit in a bit. Okay, so the 4383 means those two things. The 400 means that the hinge is 4 inches tall and 4 inches wide. And hinge, the height is always the first dimension on a hinge like this. 4 inch tall by 4 inch wide. Doesn't matter on a square hinge like this, but it would if it was 4.5 by 4 or 4 by 3.5. Height is the first dimension. 633 means two things. It means it's a satin brass hinge, but it also means that it's steel base. Okay. Now, speaking about those screw hole locations, there is a link below this video to the template that shows precisely where the locations are placed for the hinge screws. And by all means, if you're not sure if this is the right hinge for your application, review the template and compare it against the existing conditions so that you can be sure of what it is that you're working with there. Okay. That template also shows the thickness of the leaf, and that's 96 thousandths, which is very typical and common for a residential 4x4 hinge. This is a full mortise hinge, and that means that you can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there that the leaves are meant to be parallel when they're brought, well, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when they're parallel. Okay. This hinge is available on all of the common finishes. You have brass finishes, bronze finishes, chrome finishes, nickel, prime coat if you're going to paint it, black japanned, zinc coated if you want some corrosion resistance in an application that might call for that. Now below this video is a description of the hinge itself. First of all, it's full mortise. We discussed that. It is UL listed, which would be very typical to have on a residential application. You might have a attached garage. The door leading to the home from the garage is possibly 20-minute fire rated. A spring hinge like this would be compliant because it's a spring hinge and it's UL listed. It is rated for 1,000,000 cycles, which is considered grade 1. That would give you a long life expectancy out of this hinge. It is non-handed. You can install it so that it's either a left-hand application or a right-hand application. Doesn't matter. You can turn it upside down too if you wanted. We'll go over that. Easily adjustable spring tension. We'll talk about that in a moment. Special template hole location. We discussed that with the template. Designed to fit those Taylor doors and frames. It's going to be compatible with hinge preparations from 85 thousandths to 109 thousandths leaf thickness. This is 96 thousandths. And the pivot point aligns with a residential butt hinge, meaning if you have 3 hinges on the door and you want to make it self-closing, you might add 1 or 2 of these, or 3, all 3 of them. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this vertical axis of pivoting is compatible with an existing 4x4 standard residential hinge. Made of steel, 5/8 radius, as we discussed, on all 4 corners, 96 thousandths, and includes screws, wood and machine screws. Now, tension, how to set it. First of all, these are intended for doors up to 3 foot by 7 foot. Any bigger than that, and a hinge, spring hinge is not the right sort of solution. Up to an 85-pound door, Bommer recommends 2 spring hinges and 1 standard hinge. If you're going to mix and match, start at the top and work your way down on the spring hinge. If you have a door up to 110 pounds, all 3 spring hinges. Now, I'm a fan of all spring hinges, all of them, except in the event you have a 20-pound hollow core door. But if you have a solid core door, I suggest all spring hinges, and here's why. It's not for the obvious reason. It's for the reason that I've installed these, I've maintained them, I've readjusted them, I've removed them, and I can tell you from experience that you will have a greater amount of predictable and reliable operation if you have more spring hinges simply doing the job of closing the door. I liken it to a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. And having additional spring hinges share that work gets the door done into the closed position more reliably. That hinge has got to overcome the negative energy of that door opening. It's got to overcome that standstill, get the door moving into the closing cycle, overcome all of the air resistance, overcome the friction of the latch bolt hitting the strike plate, overcome a condition of the frame not being plumb. Okay, that will hamper the hinge's ability to get the job done as well. And I have found that when you have more spring hinges on the door and frame doing the job, that in the critical last few 10-degree of closing cycle, there's enough stored energy in all of those spring hinges to allow you to get the door to not only close but latch. If you're underpowered in the spring department, generally what people do is turn the tension up so high because they just simply need to get the door moving from that 90-degree and hoping that inertia will carry the door all the way closed. And that's pretty unreliable. You might not get it all the way there, or to get the door all the way to the closed position, it will slam and bounce back open sometimes as well. And if this is a fire-rated door, keep in mind that the door is only fire-rated if you've got a fire-rated label on the door and frame sometimes. But it's got to be self-closing and self-latching. So if it's not all 3 of those, you don't have a fire-rated door. It has to latch and it has to be self-closing. So I have found greater success, is the moral of the story. Now I'm a fan of hydraulic control over a door, not spring hinges. I think that an overhead surface-mounted door closer is a better way to go because you can control the closing aspect. However, there are instances when spring hinges are the only solution. And quite frankly, in residential applications, it's not practical to have a large hydraulic surface-mounted door closer on a door. So they have their place. But they need to be able to do the job that they were engineered for. And not having enough spring hinge on the door will cause fits. Especially, it might be the front door of a condo building. It's not fire rated, but it's a 3-flat unit, 3-flat building. In the summertime, the windows and doors, everything's open. And that air will just cause the door to slam. So getting a spring hinge to work is easier because you usually have more assistance in getting it closed, unless if you have an opposite condition where the air's blowing out. But in the wintertime, all those doors and windows are closed up, and you need more spring power to get that closed. Having more hinges, spring hinges on the door, allows you more options to be able to get the door to predictably work. Okay. Now, setting the tension. With every order, you're going to get a tension rod. That's that black piece of steel there. And for every hinge, you'll get a tension pin, which is that silver pin there. Okay. This order happens to have 2 spring hinges on it, so this client would naturally get 2 tension pins. Okay. Setting the tension is really simple. First of all, install the hinge, hang the door. Tension collar, though, must be pointed up. You'll see that there's a tension collar here and there's not one down here. Install with the tension collar pointed up, insert the tension rod, and rotate it clockwise. And as you do that, you reveal new additional holes in the spring hinge. Only 3 holes to be adjusted is what's recommended from Bommer. And it's into one of those new holes that you drop the tension pin. It's that simple. Okay. So start with 1 hole, test it, and go up from there. Okay. Last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo, and right above it it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer LB4383-400-633 single acting spring hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.